Now, wow, Oyibo succeed though. They play on us big time. They succeeded in dividing us along ethnic groups, whatever name you may want to call yourself, whatever language you might tend to speak. They did a great job in dividing. Of course, that has always been their hallmark, divide and rule. So Nigeria was no exception. When they came, they played on us so nicely, and they succeeded. So that there is chaos everywhere you go in Nigeria, infighting amongst people, just because they speak a different language, just because they belong to a different religion. We maim, we kill, we slaughter, we do all sort of stuff. Now, big shame, big shame. But see, I'm not blaming the youths, okay? You can check even within Nigeria. Let's start from education, okay? The way they brought us up, like check the curriculum. You will see the curriculum only reflects the ideals. When I say ideals, the fraudulent ideals of the colonialists, their agenda, that's what I'm talking about. Our curriculum, school curriculum, was just there to praise them. It wasn't there for us to get to learn who we are as a people, to get to understand our history, to get to understand how we came about, where we migrated from. It was just there to divide us, to leave us in that state of limbo where we become ignoramus, completely ignorant of what is going on around within our country. In fact, I knew very little of Nigeria, compared to some other country outside Nigeria. I am in Cross River State and I know very little about Sokoto people, their culture and their way of life. I am in Cross River State and I know very little of people in Kebbi State. You're living within a country and you know very little. Even within the news channel, NTA, you hardly see all those cultures and stuff and people, their way of life, their religion and everything. No documentary on that, nothing. So we just base, our curriculum is just based on whatever they present to us to eat. Yeah, social studies, you actually learn nothing. Everything is so archaic and barbaric and, we ended up being complete illiterate with very little knowledge of our country, Nigeria. And look at what is happening today. Everything is backfiring on us. We call these ones Fulanis, we call these ones herders, we call these ones, we call ourselves by names. And we even decide to divide the country into two. We have the Northerners, we have the Southerners and all this kind of stuff, Christians, Muslims. You see how the white people have been able to manipulate us, the Arabs included, to manipulate us, to twist us, to suit their own agenda. And today we're fighting, maiming, unlifing one another and all this kind of stuff. The Fulanis are not far from us. Where do you think people from Akwa Ibom, Cross River State come from, or even the Igbos? We came from the north. That very route taken by the Fulanis along the Lake Chad region all the way, to central Nigeria where we have Kano, Nasarawa State, Benue State, we settled there and we lived for a long time, thousands of years perhaps, before migrating further with the incursion of this same issue of religion, by the jihadists from the north coming to, to brainwash us. Then the other way around from the south along the bight of Biafra came the Europeans, to do the same thing to brainwash us into Christianity. And at the end of the day, what happens? The two religions are clashing and fighting each other. We're calling the Fulanis and, all sort of names and stuff, how they're bandits and all. We forget that they are just our distant relatives. The Northerners and Southerners are the same people. It doesn't matter where you're located. Our languages are pretty similar, very, very similar. Words, in Fulani language are just the same, like that of people in Akwa Ibom State, which is where I come from. And I've been able to identify those elements. Just the way they say it, that is how we say it. But today, Fulanis have become strangers. People we ended up hating and, wanting to fight, and all this kind of stuff, And It's just crazy. And worst of all are the politicians. They decided to use this tension, already built up by the previous politicians during the Civil War and the coup d'etat era, the post-independence era. They decided to play on it for their own selfish end. And a good example is that man called Buhari. He decided to favor some and then left some behind. And all these things, spewed out, started boiling out into what it is today. Today you see the incessant killing and maiming of our brothers and sisters, all in the name of, he's from this different ethnic group, he's from this religion, he's from the north, and all this kind of stuff. It's very unnecessary. Whereas here in Europe, it's the opposite. You see, they are all united. You see in a country, there are different people. A good example is Switzerland. It's a country with different people speaking different languages. But see how they work together, see how they live together. It doesn't matter whether you're moving from Lausanne, to a different area, to Zurich. It doesn't matter. They're all living together. They're all Swiss. They all speak different languages, almost 4 different languages. But see how they work together. Because of the way they were being brought up, because of the education they received, because of the conscientization they got from their parents. They were preaching those similarities rather than those dissimilarities. They were telling them how they were one, how they came from one source, why they should stick together if they have to be strong, if they have to build a stronger economy, if they have to work together for the betterment of its citizenry, how they need to stay close, despite the fact that they fought one another during the First and Second World War. Our politicians have failed us. The educational system has failed us. The religious leaders have failed us. Civil society failed. Churches failed. Mosques failed. It's only by traveling out that we got to understand who we are as a people and why we need to work together for the betterment of our nation, of our continent in general, of our color. May God help us.